they support each other constantly. Otherwise, they do not have the function of perpetually supporting each other. The term consciousness that was used to make a logical point earlier as one of the three dharmas does not refer to the evolving consciousnesses, so how does bringing up the matter of heat as non-universal conflict with our principles? Our former point is completely proven.
Moreover, since life and heat among these three dharmas is only impure, we also know that consciousness, like them, is definitely not pure. When one is born in the formless realm and produces a pure mind, what consciousness supports that life? Consequently, we know that there is a consciousness as retribution that is a single species, is perpetual and universal, and can support life and heat, and that is the eighth consciousness.
33. Mind at birth and death. A scripture says that at birth and death, all kinds of beings are mentally distracted and not in the mindless samadhi. If this, eighth, consciousness did not exist, mind would not exist at the moment of birth or death. At the time of birth or death, body and mind are confused and dull, as they are in a dreamless sleep or deep faint, and the sharply perceiving evolving consciousnesses do not operate. In these states, the mode of activity and objects of these six forms of consciousness cannot be known, and therefore these consciousnesses, as in the mindless state of samadhi, are not actually present. The existence of the activities and objects of the sixfold evolving consciousnesses must be knowable, just as they are at other times. Because the real consciousness as retribution is extremely fine and subtle, its mode of activity and objects cannot be discerned. It is the result of karma that leads to rebirth, and for a time continues in a series, is perpetual, and is unchanging. It is a distracted mind, and to refer to it as mind at birth or mind at death does not violate correct reasoning.
There is a theory, by Nanda, that at birth and death the five, material, consciousnesses definitely do not exist. The mental consciousness, manovanana, grasps its object as a result of the functioning of the five, material forms of consciousness, as a result of teaching, or as a result of samadhi, and since these causes are non-existent at the time of birth, then the mental consciousness must not exist then either. We reply, if this were the case, sentient beings born in the formless realm will be forever without a mental consciousness, because the mind in samadhi arises as a result of the dispersal of the mental consciousness. The five, material forms of consciousness and teachings by others do not exist in the formless realm, and there is no cause for the appearance of the dispersed mind that brings about samadhi. Nanda says, suppose that mind in samadhi suddenly appears later as a result of habitual repetition. We reply, why does it not appear as soon as one is born in the formless realm? Also, the mental consciousness ought to appear by way of habitual repetition in both the realm of desire and the realm of form when one is first born there.
If it does not appear during the first moment due to dullness and confusion, then this is the same argument we made earlier, so why bother with some other theory? According to other schools, at the time of birth or death, etc., there is a kind of mental consciousness that is extremely subtle and whose mode of activity and objects are imperceptible. They should realize that this is really the eighth consciousness, because the extremely effective mental consciousness is not like this. Also, at the moment of death, a sensation of coldness gradually is felt at the top or bottom of the body as a result of good or bad karma. This would not occur in the absence of the eighth consciousness, because the evolving consciousnesses are unable to appropriate a body, because each of the five forms of material consciousness, such as visual consciousness, has a separate support, such as the material eye, and because they are not active at death.
The sixth, manas, consciousness is not in the body at all times, its objects are not fixed, and when it fills the body it always continues in a series, so the sensation of cold ought not to arise gradually because of it. Only mind as retribution, through the power of previous karma, is constant, is all-pervading, continues in a series, and appropriates the parts of the body, and when it leaves these areas of the body it appropriates, the sensation of cold appears, because life, heat, and consciousness are not separated. The area where the cold appears is no longer sentient, and even though the eighth consciousness changes and has that part of the body as an object, it no longer appropriates it. We therefore know for certain that the eighth consciousness exists.
34. Consciousness and name and form, Nama-Ripa. A scripture says that consciousness and name and form, namariipa, condition each other. In this way, these two dharmas evolve by supporting each other, like two bundles of reeds, and they evolve simultaneously. In the absence of this eighth consciousness, the substance of the other consciousnesses would not exist. The scripture itself explains in the following manner. Name, nama, refers to the four non-material aggregates, such as feeling, consciousness, etc., and form, ripa, refers to the kalala, embryonic material body, etc. These two in consciousness persist through mutual support, like two bundles of reeds supporting each other. They perpetually evolve together, simultaneously, and never separate. The evolving consciousnesses, such as visual consciousness, are included in the category nama, so without this eighth consciousness, what supports them? Also, it cannot be said that the aggregate of consciousness included in nama refers to the five material forms of consciousness, and that by consciousness, the scripture means the sixth consciousness, because in the early embryonic state, there are no five materia forms of consciousness. Also, all six evolving consciousnesses are discontinuous and therefore are without the power or continuity to appropriate name and form, so how can it be said that they constantly support name and form? Therefore, the word consciousness, in the scripture, refers to the eighth consciousness.
35. The four nutriments. A scripture says that all sentient beings are sustained by nutriment. Without this eighth consciousness, the substance of nutriment in the form of consciousness would not exist. A scripture lists four kinds of nutriment. The first is the nutriment we consume in mouthfuls, which is characterized by change and destruction. It consists of flavors, smells, and contact in the realm of desire, all serving as food when the object changes and deteriorates. Consequently, the sense base of form, ripa, is not categorized as food eaten in mouthfuls, because form has no function when it is changing and deteriorating.
The second kind is nutriment as contact, which is characterized by contact with objects. It is impure contact that, at the moment of grasping its object, obtains satisfaction and serves as nutriment. Also, contact is associated with various consciousnesses, but it especially holds the meaning of nutriment in connection with the first six forms of consciousness, because contact with gross, obvious objects, obtaining satisfaction, pleasure, and consoling indifference are especially nourishing. The third form of nutriment is intention, characterized by wish or aspiration. Impure intention and desire evolving together aspire to a desirable object and thus serve as nutriment. Although this intention is associated with various consciousnesses, it especially holds the meaning of nutriment in connection with mental consciousness, because that consciousness especially aspires towards objects.
The fourth kind is nutriment as consciousness, which is characterized by grasping and holding. It is impure consciousness that increases through the power of food eaten in mouthfuls, contact, and intention, and serves as nutriment. Although this kind of consciousness is common to the substances of various forms of consciousness, it especially deserves the meaning of nutriment in connection with the eighth consciousness, because it is homogeneous, continues in a series, and is preeminent in grasping and holding eats. Thus the Abhidharmasamukha speaks of four nutriments comprised in 3 aggregates, 5 sense bases, and 11 sense fields. These 4 are called nutriment because they sustain the bodies and lives of beings and prevent their disruption and destruction. Nutriment in mouthfuls is used only in the realm of desire, and nutriment consisting of contact and intention is found throughout the 3 realms, but all forms of nutriment depend on the evolving consciousnesses and may or may not exist depending on whether the latter exists.